So like, what I'm like.
Hello. All right, Fred, be quiet so I can introduce us. Hello, everyone. Dr. Holly MacKenna, Integrative Psychiatrist with Dara Wellness, here for the big, easiest ways to wellness. And today I have a very good friend joining us, Dr. Fred Sautter, who is a psychologist, family therapist, expert in treating PTSD. And we thought with all that's happening between the election, the pandemic, I mean, really, there's like something new every day, that talking about how we communicate and how we can more effectively communicate would be really helpful for all of us. So with that, welcome, Fred.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about you. I know all about you, but tell everyone else who's listening so they can have an idea of what your deal is. Why I would have you on.
What my deal is. Boy. So I'm a clinical psychologist, and I worked in post-traumatic stress disorder for about 15, 20 years. And but my initial training was in couples therapy and family therapy. And so my approach to treating PTSD was usually included a spouse or family. And I developed a couple-based PTSD treatment as I was doing that. And that's going to be published in a book by Oxford University Press in about 3 months.
Awesome.
And that's a treatment that I use for PTSD. And I get to do it with whoever it is that has a PTSD and their partner. And invariably, if one person has PTSD in a relationship, they both got PTSD, whether they like it or not. It's how we're affected by our partners. So certainly something I think a lot about with the pandemic, knowing that, my patients are locked in, as I am, as we all are in some ways. And it makes it hard to communicate, and it makes it challenging to be with another person, no matter how much you love them or like them or whatever. It's really a challenge. So very timely topic, and it's great that you're doing this work, Holly.
Thank you. Yeah, I, as you know, I did pediatrics before I changed over to psychiatry. So I learned early on, even before I was a parent myself, or before I was even a spouse myself, how much the family members are the experts at what's going on. And family, I use the term family loosely. That can be like a close friend, that could be a roommate, a partner, a child, a parent, whomever it is that's in that person's life day to day, definitely has a way better picture of what's going on with that person than the physician, the therapist, whomever is seeing them, at most once or twice a week. Because they see them at 2 a.m. when they're getting up and having a panic attack, or when they're watching a not so pleasant debate and yelling at the TV. Like, they see all those things happen and see the fallout and have to deal with the fallout themselves. So I think we don't give enough credit to family members and partners in life as we should. When it comes to keeping ourselves healthy and keeping others healthy. There's so much value in that.
It's interesting in terms of research. It's a lot of literature showing that whether you're talking about like a psychological therapy, or you're talking about medical treatment, that when a family member or relative is present in the room with the patient and the doctor, the outcomes are better. And initially nobody really understood why, and then they've got people like me involved, and just the fact that you have a different context to learn to understand the person, and we live our lives in a social world with other people around us. So what really matters is how you are with people, and that goes for medicine and psychology and everything we do. So it's kind of cool. I love my work.
Yeah, and you're great at it. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've seen ourselves like how much a partner or family member can influence people's treatment, how they can actually get people into seeing us. So having those relationships is really valuable in so many ways. And now we're in this time of this pandemic. We're going on what, month 7 or 8? I've lost track. Honestly, my pandemic brain is like turned to mush, so I don't even know. But that really changes the dynamic of how we are at home in such a way that it's like everyone's suddenly retired, but you didn't really have a plan to retire. Like we're all home together, taking on different roles. Even within our traditional family roles that we maybe held, like those look different, you know, like our, if we have kids, maybe they're doing things in a different way, you know, for working, that looks different, whether it be that we're working remotely or we're going into work, we're wearing masks, we're staying separate from people. You know, at first it was kind of like an ongoing hurricane party without a storm. So, you know, we were all eating the snacks and having all the fun. Right. Like it was a big slumber party, right? You know, we did the Zoom calls with the cocktails, if that's something we partake in, or, you know, or just like chatting with our friends. Now it's gotten to be something that we're wondering when it's going to end, right? And it does put a stress on our relationships, whether it be the relationships we have within our 4 walls or relationships with folks maybe we haven't been able to see because we're trying to keep them safe, or they're trying to keep us safe, or travel is restricted, or what have you, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, and so communication.
That relationships enter into the picture. You know, two other things are, I mean, first of all, you bring, I'm doing this from my home. You know, so your role in your house changes when you're doing your work in your house. It's like all of a sudden your kids, your partners, and whoever are, you know, they're at work with you. And there's
your coworkers
are at work. There's that. And then there's also the fact that I became more sensitive to this. You work at the VA, and so many people, when COVID really first hit us, you know, I don't know how many people at the VA we were treating, and they were losing patients. It was traumatic, I mean, for everybody in the building. We love our veterans.
Right.
And, you know, quickly realized that, you know, they're being treated by teams of doctors and nurses. And the relationships of those teams are, in some ways, especially in times of trauma, more intimate than the relationship you have with your husband and your wife. The kind of sharing you do is different, but you're more interdependent when you're caring for a patient together. And if you have a trauma and the patient dies, you've shared that painful experience with somebody you work with. And, you know, so I've had to learn that if I'm going to do couples therapy with somebody who's coming from that kind of environment and that kind of trauma, that perhaps the way that the couple needs to be 2 doctors or a doctor and a nurse or whatever that were there, you know, when they lost the patient they cared so much about. Police officers often ride in a car with another cop. And, you know, you can ask any police officer, you know, their partners.
Right.
You know, and often it's an issue where you have a partner at home who you're married to, and you have your partner who you risk your life with every day. So, you know, there's all kinds of like ways that relationships matter. And I think we're all kind of trained as we grow up to think of ourselves after we become adults. We're not members of the family anymore. It's just us. We have to take responsibility for our behavior. That's, you know, I don't want to be copying out for people, but it's not just a person. It's always people. So, and there's nothing whining about saying like, you know, somebody I'm working with is making my work hard for me, or, you know, my wife is driving me crazy. I can't get my work done. I mean, those things are real. And when you have to work on that problem, you know, everybody who's involved should be there. So that's my pitch for couple work. Not all the time, but you know.
No, but it's interesting because you made a point that I actually hadn't considered. Like we've I've joked around myself, about my coworkers acting crazy when I'm talking about my 4-year-old who's, in the room with me while I'm trying to get work done. But really, this pandemic has changed things in a way that our literal work coworkers, we have a more intimate relationship with them, whether we like it or not, whether it be because we are in these kind of, like you and I are in this, virtual space together, whether it be that, so they're kind of seeing our living room, or if it's a teacher and student, they're seeing the student's bedroom. We've heard of, things going down because of that, seeing what's in the house, or just sharing moments of feeling vulnerable. I think we've all gotten more comfortable with showing parts of ourselves that maybe weren't considered okay to show in the workspace before, just because of the nature of needing that connection. I think especially for folks who maybe you really had work as a big part of their identity or a big part of their day, if they are only connecting now with work or school or whatever it may be through a virtual space, I think naturally there's going to be more intimacy happening between those people because you're just so desperate for it. So it's just, as human beings, we need that to survive.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's really, it's very interesting.
Yeah. You should do a study on that, Fred.
Okay. I'm pretty open about things, and I'm in therapy myself. And when I first had to switch from therapy, see my therapist in an office, to doing it this way, it's like all of a sudden my therapist was closer to me.
Right.
I had to redefine my relationship. I'm seeing my therapist in my house. So I can't talk about my house like it's some great place anymore. They actually get to see how I mess it up. These kind of contexts have a huge difference. And I'm thinking with you, we've done a group together at the VA. And when you start comfortably talking about your family and your love for your children, the emotional environment in that group totally changes. They see you as somebody who's connected with other people. We need connections to survive ourselves.
Right.
A lot of people would like to think we don't, but that's just like BS. But we also get comforted by seeing that other people need connections, because that has implications. I could see how you were great with your husband, you're great with your family, and that makes me more hopeful. Like, hey, maybe she could be great with me. I just need to get more connected with Dr. MacKenna. And that is true. It works like that. So it's another way of looking at ourselves, not as individuals, but as members of something else.
So yeah, for sure. So, given that folks are in this space, as we've been talking about, they're definitely feeling more intimate. With that, people start sharing more. With that, people start feeling more vulnerable. Then you add to the mix that we don't know when this pandemic's going to end. You add to the mix, now we have this election coming up that's causing a lot of anxiety for people, no matter, how they're voting. There's a lot of anxiety and feelings about it. And then there's just so much. Oh, and holidays. Of course, you can't forget those, even though we don't know what they're going to look like.
That's right.
So really right now, people, I think, are looking for ways to be able to stay connected with people that they love and care about, maybe in spite of different viewpoints, or being able to understand each other more readily. Or let's say they have to have, because they want to keep grandma safe, they have to have Thanksgiving virtually. They still want to have that intimate connection. What are ways that people can approach communicating with each other in a way to feel that not only are they feeling heard, but they are able to give space to the person they're communicating with? So there's a real back and forth, and not just I'm going to make sure I say this and I have no idea what they said back because I was so focused on saying what I got to say.
So, communication is everything. If you're a couples therapist, you know that regardless of what kind of problem a couple has, or, a couple comes in and perhaps the woman has a terrible problem with depression or schizophrenia, a major mental disorder, things like that. It doesn't matter. Communication and problem solving are the two things that people do that affect relationships the most. And when relationships have problems, then generally, improving one or both of those things will make a dramatic impact on improving the relationship. Certainly there are other things that are important, but just communication is a big deal. So, and we all think we communicate well, and none of us do. I mean, we all suck when it comes to communication. I remember when I was first getting trained, and I was actually married to a psychologist, and had to do an assignment with her, and immediately realized that I was totally screwing up with her. She started reacting adversely. I was trying to do communication training with her. I couldn't. I wasn't used to really listening to her. And when I started paraphrasing with her, which is a great communication skill, you and I are talking. You hear me talking right now. I don't really know what you're hearing from me.
Right.
I don't, what kind of conclusions are you making about me? Maybe you're thinking God, Fred talks too much. Why doesn't he be quiet so I can go on to the next question? A fantasy I might have about, we all wonder what people are thinking as we're talking to them. And the best way to know whether you've communicated effectively with another person is after you've told them, you can ask them to paraphrase what they heard from you. So, when things are problematic, if you're having a conversation with your partner, stopping at the end of every chunk of communication and then asking them, how did you hear what I said? What was your experience of listening to me? Could you paraphrase? Just tell me what I said. If you start doing that, you'd be astounded at how few times people are hearing what you think they're hearing. And that's just a simple practice that gets people to correct things. And your skills improve when you begin to see that all of a sudden your partner is giving back to you what you actually meant to say to them. So that's just an example, of one skill. It's powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I could see paraphrasing also being really useful within, the workplace. If you're doing something virtually like we are now and having a conversation with someone, it's, we've both been working virtually with patients, so we know that you can pick up a lot virtually, but there is sometimes, especially if there isn't the best connection, like electronic connection, there can be a delay. Sometimes people freeze. So making sure that everything that is said is heard the way intended is super important, because you don't always get some of the nonverbal cues that you would get if you were face to face in real life. It's just the nature of, what's going on with the virtual world. No matter how good it is, there's always going to be maybe a little bit that isn't quite there. And so making sure that the person that you're talking to is hearing what you intend them to hear, super important, right? And it helps them feel like you actually care, that they heard what you intended. And so you can clarify if they didn't.
No, that's a great point. I mean, it's kind of flattering when somebody says, "What did you hear from me?" It's it means, wow, it really matters. They're not just talking, putting on a display of who they are. They're interested in me knowing and understanding what they're talking about, and anything that honors the relationship between two people deepens, the conversation. And it also means that people start caring about how the other one feels, and whether, I want you to enjoy talking to me because I like talking to you. Often that doesn't get communicated, and which brings another thing into the picture of people have a lot of trouble talking about feeling.
Right.
And feelings are, really, really important in terms of communication. I've done research on, what matters when people are talking. And a lot of the research has been like in business settings, things like that, or crisis situations. And they find that what people hear is not necessarily the content of the speech, exactly what they said, what the words are, but we communicate what our feelings are. There's a way we're talking about something. And, if somebody is telling you that they're happy with you and they're grimacing, and I really like what you said, Holly. Now, can I talk? Well, I said, I really like what you said. Did I sound like I like what you said? I mean,
Yeah.
what I just said, not going to be good, huh? I mean, I was acting like a jerk.
Right, for sure. Yeah, so, I think, no, go ahead. Yeah,
just learning to say, ask other people how they feel. Get into a practice of, if I want to communicate about a feeling with you, being very specific about it and saying, when you don't look at me when I'm talking, it makes me feel, really impatient and almost angry because I feel like you're not really listening. So, I'm just letting you know, I'm not saying that I'm mad at you. I'm not saying an opinion about you as a person. I'm saying that I have a feeling that happens when you have a certain behavior that you do. If you just didn't do that, then I wouldn't be feeling this way. So it gives you a way of correcting things. And, those kinds of modifications make huge difference in terms of the way people get along. Making I statements, I feel bad when you don't look at me when I talk. That using an I statement means that I'm owning what I'm saying. I'm owning my feelings. So often we say to other people, you are really pissing me off.
Yeah, you made me cry.
And it's like, I mean, what's the impact? It's like you feel attacked. I'm talking about you. And but I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about how I feel when I talk to you. And, that has to be made specific when you talk to people, and it makes other people comfortable. Like, you're not responsible for how I feel when we're talking, right?
Right. I mean, for all I know, my not looking at you is reminding you of when your mom would put you in timeout and ignore you as a child and triggers all kinds of memories that have nothing to do with me. And so I like not only the I statement, but the specificity of getting down to you're not looking at me makes me feel this way, or I feel this way because you're not looking at me, I guess is the better way to say it, because I can't make you feel anything. But it gives more insight into how you're feeling, but then it's also specific about what it is in our relationship that might be causing a response.
That's right.
That maybe I have some power over. So I'm more knowledgeable that might be triggering for you.
Yeah.
And so when folks are seeing family members talking about the election, talking about outcomes, talking about holidays, talking about the pandemic and all the different feelings, getting specific like that, and less in this kind of you're a bad person, amorphous kind of place, more in the specific of I feel sad when you say X.
Right.
Because it triggers this in me.
Yeah. And, just as you're talking, I'm just thinking that with the pandemic, I mean, we all feel lousy.
Right.
So it's not the fault of the person who's living with us.
Right.
And yet, if my partner is looking at me like, she's pissed off at me all the time, then I'm thinking like, what am I doing wrong? Well, no,
Right.
it's a pandemic. I think we're all kind of beginning to catch on to that. But, some people don't. And it's very, very hard to kind of keep track of that. That's why it's important to be really, if you can, be neat and organized about the way you communicate when it's important.
Mm-hmm.
First thing I do when I see couples or families is I suggest that they find a time during the week to have like a meeting with each other and, find a place in your house where you can just sit and it's just the two of you. And then all of a sudden you start attending like, okay, I shouldn't be setting up a meeting with Holly when I'm like really mad at somebody else. Not fair to Holly, right? And if you're talking about something that's really complicated, you really need to be on your game when you do it.
Right.
How many people, if anybody's watching this, can think of, times they've been with their partner and they get into a complicated issue, but they're driving around in the car, or you're in the grocery store, something comes up.
Mm-hmm.
We have this naive belief that if an issue comes up, address it. Well, no. I mean, maybe you shouldn't address it then. Maybe if you're angry, you should wait till you settle down. The reality of emotions is that emotions cloud our thinking, and they cloud our ability to communicate with other people. So if you find you're getting angry at somebody else, which is really easy during pandemic, that's not the time to talk about it. But if you have a timeout, 11 o'clock every morning, you just sit down, you have a cup of coffee together. And let's make sure this is a time when everything's cool. We're good. That's the time you can talk about something that's complicated and really get something, accomplished. And you do it within a supportive context. And you're making a statement that your relationship is important, that we have to have this special time to do this work. I mean, it really honors the other person, your relationship, the power of a home. It's not just a messy place where you fight. There's a place in your home you can really do good stuff for your partner and your relationship.
Yeah, I think it's important, like you're saying, you're having a meeting with me, but you're mad at someone else. I think it's still important to have that time to communicate that with your partner and your loved one. As we've been saying, during this time when people are physically isolating and kind of staying in their pods, the pods can start to feel smaller and smaller, but that doesn't mean the outside influences aren't still coming in and affecting us. And when they affect us, it's going to be important to communicate that to the other folks in our pod. So they know, so my kids know, mommy's not upset at me.
Yes.
She's upset because of what just happened when she was watching the news or whatever it is that we're communicating to each other. So they know, A, it's okay to react to things and to be upset, but B, you don't have to target that at the person in your pod if it's not about them. And if it is about them, you need to communicate that so you can let it be handled more effectively than just screaming at each other and not really hearing each other, because you're going into that emotive space where nobody's really listening at all.
I wonder how many relationships are really being negatively impacted just because the other person is miserable and frustrated. Mm-hmm. It's because of us. We have a role in that. So it really takes compassion, and you have to have your act together to kind of realize, I'm acting like I'm mad all the time. Maybe I ought to tell my partner they have nothing to do with it.
Right.
And then if you do that, maybe the two of you can figure out something to do so you won't be mad anymore. Maybe you can be creative about creating some happiness. When we're inhibited about, communicating about those things, it just really is very destructive. We don't realize the capacity for destruction we have in terms of how we talk and what we don't talk about, just as well. So.
And it's not good for your health either. Yeah, I'm just thinking, the more traditional ways of being in relationships, when we were growing up I'm just, thinking like, dad goes to work and X, Y, and Z happens, and he's not allowed to talk about it when he comes home. Like, he leaves it all there. And, things happen with mom's at home with the kids, but she's not allowed to talk about it because you keep it there, and he's stressed out from work.
Yeah.
And how much did that cause some early deaths? Because you're stressed out all the time and you can't talk to anyone about it. Like, there's nowhere safe.
No, you're absolutely right.
That's like a beaver cleaver example. That's like extreme example, obviously. But how many times do we do that? Like, how many times, I mean, even myself as a working parent, have I had to check myself and be like, you know what, I'm yelling at my husband right now when I'm really pissed off about what happened at work 5 hours ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's got nothing to do with him. Unfortunately, I got an Italian husband who calls me on it, but, not all couples do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you might have a huge argument when it's got nothing to do with the person you're arguing with. Like you said, like, you're not even mad at that person, but that's who you're taking it out on because that's who's in your pod.
Right. And imagine if you're a doc who does infectious diseases and you're coming home from work, hard for me to imagine that people aren't feeling challenged in that field every single second.
Right.
You bring that really intense concern and anxiety into your home.
Mm-hmm.
If that's not explained to your partner and your children, then it's like taking them into a room where somebody's dying because you've seen it, you've had the feeling. I'm sure it's indescribable. You bring it home and everybody starts getting your vibes, and they're thinking, hey, Mom just came home. She should be happy to see me. Why is she weeping? These things have to be clarified. There's also kind of unpleasant to talk about it, but there was something in CNN yesterday. I forget what the word, though, the shadow pandemic, they call it.
Right, yeah.
And it had to do with, at least a part of it that I saw, involved somebody getting together, I think it was a parent, or maybe it was with their father.
Right.
Who separated with their mothers, didn't realize that the father was an alcoholic. And so, when we're in a closed space, we bring our vulnerabilities into it. And, there's a powerful thing that happens between trauma exposure, and alcohol that is really, something to watch out for. And people who have PTSD, just, domestic violence is common with people who have severe PTSD if they're drinking a lot in front of their partner. We don't think about those things. People drink when they're trying to relax at home. You don't really think about the fact that a person is bringing a risk factor into the house. We really need to think about some of our behaviors and the fact that violence can happen at home. And
right.
People can, do a drug, and now they're doing the drug all the time in front of the other person. And that can have, a huge impact. We're all behaving badly at home. How can we not behave badly? Because, it's such a challenging time. So we start to, we have tools sometimes we use to feel better that, we just use them once in a while, maybe privately, maybe somewhere else. I'm not saying that they're good or bad. Try to be non-judgmental about it. It's important. But people need to have discussions about things like that. It's kind of unpleasant, but it can be done if you talk about it directly, like we're talking about. It's a good time for a family meeting is to maybe mention that, I'm drinking a little bit too much bourbon every night. It makes me a little bit cross with the kids when they come in. And, it's not the kid's fault. It's also not my fault that I'm drinking a little bit too much bourbon at night. I mean, things suck. So
right. And going back to like, what is making you make that choice? What is
right.
it? Are you a teacher that's suddenly in a different situation, worrying about your kids that you're seeing at school, worrying about your own exposure, worrying about what's happening in their lives,
Right.
not being able to connect with them in the same way that you have been used to, what maybe drew you into teaching?
Mm-hmm.
And now coming home to your own kids and having their demands on top of it, and not feeling like there's a space for you to have all of that shared with your partner. And like you said, it might be as simple as, we're going to meet together every day
Mm-hmm.
before the kids get home from school and talk it out and just make sure we're from Hey Blue. And just make sure, we're in a safe space. I mean, that reminds me, your dog barking. If folks aren't sure about how to do that, like where to meet, how to meet, I always love this. Those who've seen like the Tonight Show, like Jimmy Fallon, he and his wife will walk around their neighborhood together. They usually have like questions coming from the audience. This is when he was broadcasting from home. I don't know if he still is. But I always love that example. Like, go outside, get some vitamin D with your partner, go for a walk. If you have kids, they can be walking with you and you guys could be talking. The kids are too busy doing whatever they do, probably to even realize. Like, if you really don't feel like you have space without them, taking them to the park and then maybe talking there. There's different ways that you can do it and be creative around it, just to make sure you have the sacred space together as whatever type of unit you are. Parent and child, couple, good friend, neighbor, whomever is your person or persons, like having those times, it's important. And if I have, we've referenced the VA, both of us working for the VA. I have veterans who live alone, who have friends who live alone, and they just meet up every day. And that's important for both of them.
Oh, yes, that's incredible.
Right? Just to feel like you have that space with another person. So it doesn't necessarily have to be limited to those who are with partners or with families in the same house. You can still hold that space, practice your communication skills, but feel connected, which is so much a part of what makes us human and what keeps us healthy and alive and in good space for ourselves. So there's still ways to do that, and it's so important.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned so many good things there. I don't even know which way to go. But, one thing I'm remembering is there's a book that's, I forget the name of the book, but it's about a study done at Harvard where they followed graduates of Harvard basically for the rest of their lives to see what kinds of things affected their adjustment. And then they made the study a little bit more generalizable by including people who weren't all, a lot of people who have money, and they weren't all white and go into a school that costs a lot. So it was a little bit more generalizable. But they found out everybody had one thing in common, that when people got older and started getting isolated, that they could predict who was going to die by whether the person got on the phone and they were alone, and they'd been spending most of their time alone since the last call. They would contact them every year. They found that the way they predicted death was not by looking at their physical data or at their physicals. All the things we think about our doctor looks at to tell us if we're sick. If an older person is alone in their apartment or their house, just not all the time, there's a strong likelihood that they're going to die, because they're not getting any support. They're not getting the things that we need. And there's so many things that get messed up. So not being connected is just so unhealthy. So, I love what you're saying. It's also true that in terms of dealing with stress, there's a thing that I call couple soothing in terms of treatment with PTSD. If somebody gets triggered who has post-traumatic stress disorder, you start remembering the car accident. It brings back all these reactions. If you get together with your partner, you go for a walk, like you're suggesting, you start to loosen up, and, you're doing something that's inherently enjoyable and relaxing, and it changes the whole context of the person's post-traumatic stress. It's kind of like a treatment almost.
Right.
We don't think about, because we can make each other feel lousy, we know we can make each other feel lousy at home. But we don't think about all the things we can do with our partner that make them feel good. We don't talk about those things enough. And if you're talking about feeling, if you come home, I'm your husband, and you're obviously not feeling well, and I know that if we do go to the snowball stand, and you're going to be happy, then I should take you to the snowball stand and ask you, how are you feeling? So you become more aware of your emotions, and then you're more aware of the fact that I care about you. So I'm sure Todd does that with you all the time, right?
Only when there's a short line.
Well, that's because he's smart. He knows how you are with mine. So, we're talking about a lot of different things, fairly complicated, but there's opportunities for really doing things to help ourselves be more healthy, and making other people feel better, and to become particularly important during a time like this, when it's almost like, to some extent, isolation is being imposed on people.
Right.
Even if you live with somebody, you get so sick and tired of being around them, you go somewhere in your house to be alone, which is kind of bizarre.
Right.
But we're all getting kind of crazy, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely, you're feeling a little bit like losing time. We already know that our brains have changed because of that chronic stress. So that emotive part of our brains is actually bigger. That amygdala has taken over. We're all acting like teenagers, like our cognitive areas are smaller and not working so effectively.
Yeah. No, the stress, your stress system is is turned on like all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a study on rats with a guy named Hans Selye, studying why people get ulcers, and if they just keep on punishing the rat for no reason, so the rat has no warning when the punishment's coming, the rat gets ulcers, gets stressed, and ultimately dies. And that becomes a model for the worst kind of stress you can have. It's unpredictable, and it happens no matter what you do, and it's constant. So like you're saying, your body's stress system is always gearing up for something, but there's nothing to happen except everything, which is really, we don't cut ourselves a break. So
right.
Something we need to do for each other, whether it be friends, partners, whatever. If somebody can get anything out of the conversation we're having in front of people, is that you can make other people feel happy and feel healthier, just by being a little bit thoughtful and making some minor modifications in the way you look at things and the way you behave with them. We can really be a doctor to somebody else all the time. So.
Yeah. And talking about being having that empathetic conversation and communication, just remember, and it shouldn't be hard to forget at this point, we're all traumatized at this point. We've all been going through this uncertainty, that it's made changes in our brains. It's made biological changes in us. Mm-hmm. And it's a place of trauma. And some of us have other traumas that this is amplifying, or other things that it's reminding us of, or losses that we haven't been able to fully process. And so we're all coming from a place that isn't our best selves.
Absolutely.
And so knowing that, even when you're talking to someone who you love and adore and have up on that, they are the best of the best, even they aren't their best selves right now. And just knowing that and keeping space for that while communicating, that alone can make a big difference in how we hear each other and how we connect. Absolutely. So Fred, we're getting close to the hour. I want to make sure folks know how to get a hold of you. I forgot to ask you this before we got live, so I'll be typing while you talk. Do you have what's the best way? Do you have an email, or what's the best way for people to, or website?
They can call me. My work line is 504-571-5594. And my email is fredericksautter.phd@yahoo.com. Or they can look up relational and behavioral health. That's what I do.
Frederick Sautter at, whoops. Okay, that one didn't go. Okay.
Frederick Sautter, PhD@yahoo.com.
Okay. I'll type it in when we're done.
Okay.
And if folks want to find other episodes or are interested in integrative psychiatry, want to do a free consultation call, you can find me at darawellnessnola.com. Also, if you're looking at this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And Fred, thank you so much for joining me today.
When I see couples,
you're amazing.
I have to say you're my role model. That now when I see couples, the first time I see them, I don't charge them. Often, because I want them to be able to be free to tell me what their problem is without having to take money into account. And so if people are wondering, are things right with my husband or my wife? Do I really need to talk to somebody? It seems like an overreaction. Just come in and talk to me. I'll tell you whether you need help.
So there's Fred's number. We'll go back in and write his website for you.
You're an amazing woman.
I know I have mad skills. I'm telling you.
Boy. Well, I know because I said you're the doctor you are. You're the best holistic doctor in the city.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us. Always a pleasure, and see you next week.
Okay. Great being on your show. Bye-bye.